blocking out the color for my branch. I have all my mesh maps created. I'm ready to rock and roll. I'm working on the branch texture set inside of my layers stack here. And let's go ahead and start defining some of the colors. Now I know that I'm going to have two different sets of illusions, if you will. I'm going to have the color on the top be kind of a dry tan looking, and then I want to have a little bit of a water line where it's going to turn into a much darker brown towards the bottom. So the under the water line is going to be one color, and above the water line is going to be a different color. And I think I can do that simply with a small little levels call. So let's go ahead and get that started. It's pretty easy. Let's block out all the color. I'm going to use some fill layers here, and I think what I'm going to do is start figuring out what color I want my branch to be. Now, I'm not going to worry so much about roughness at the moment, although I could leave that channel on. It's not going to be a metallic object, so we can turn that one off. And we don't need to worry about height or normal, so just color and roughness. The height and the normal information is coming from the high-res sculpture, so I don't need to add any new details in for the branch. But let's experiment around with color here. I know I want it to be kind of a tan, somewhere like that. Yeah, I'm liking that. And remember, this is just the base. This is just the base. We're going to be layering on a whole lot of extra details here in a minute. So that's a pretty good start for the base. I may even go a little bit lighter in value. Change the hue ever so slightly. I think I'm on the wrong side of red. There we go. Yeah, just make it a little bit tan. I'm liking that. Now, let's experiment with how we can use the mask editor inside of Substance Painter to really take advantage of both the ambient occlusion and the curvature. So I'm going to create another fill layer, and we're going to make it a pretty wild, wacky color, just so we can see the influence of the mask on our object. And I'm going to right-click on the object, and I'm going to add a black mask. Now, with the mask selected, let's go ahead and add in our effects. Okay, so we're going to use the mask editor. Oops, not an effect. I'm sorry. Mask editor is a generator. Excuse me. There we go. And specifically, we're going with this one right here, the mask editor. Now, the mask editor is great because it's using all of that information that we established and collected from our mesh map baking system, and it's using that as a mask, and it's pretty neat. There's a couple in here that I want to make sure I highlight. First and foremost, curvature. Curvature is pretty great. As you can see here, most of the stuff that we're getting at the moment is curvature information, which is fantastic because everything that's red is coming from the curvature. Now, let's also examine the impact of the ambient occlusion. Now, if we were to turn that up, there's probably not a lot of ambient occlusion stuff happening at the moment. Yeah, it looks like most on this object, the details that we're getting are coming from the curvature. So I want to use the curvature, and I'm also going to invert the curvature. So if I go back up to the top, there's a global invert. And now, once we invert it, there we go. Now all the cracks are starting to get filled in. Let's do this. Let's go back into the curvature. Yeah, I think it's a little too... You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to turn my global invert back to false. And then inside of my curvature state, let's just invert the curvature. And let's see here. I'm going to do a little bit more. Let's change the mode to cavities. Yeah, and I inverted it again. That's what I was after. Because the curvature map gives us so much. And the mode here is an important thing to be aware of. We can do just the edges. We can do the cavities. We can do both under dual, which is pretty neat. That one may be... Yeah, I may be going with that one here in a minute. I think we're going to have a couple different shades of brown. So the first one will be the dark shade. So I'll do cavities. And then I'm going to duplicate the layer, and I'll make it a much darker shade of brown. So clearly we don't want red. Let's find a good color in here that's going to be neat. Yeah, now we're getting somewhere. Find a nice dark shade of brown. This is bark, so it probably should be nice dark brown. Yeah, I like that. I'm already deciding that I don't like this uniform color of bark on the top. It's a good value, but it's pretty even. So before I go any further, let's do some generated effects on this one as well. I really like having that, yeah, I think I'm going to use that gradient generator that I used before. So instead of using a color, let's do this. Let's find a good procedural texture down in our texture library. And I'm going to see if I can find a nice grunge one. Yeah, maybe like this one. I'm going to load that one into the base color. Ooh, I like that. That's a cool look. Now on this one, we're going to have a generated effect, okay? And we're going to use that gradient that we were using before. And I'm sorry, it's not a generated effect. It's a filter effect, and I always get that mixed up. There we go. Let's find the gradient. There it is. Here's good old gradient. Now let's pick the colors. Remember, we're color mapping between the black and white pixels from the procedural image, and we're color mapping the black and white pixels to the gradient colors. So let's just pick a couple here. I'm going to start with white. Let's get the white one dialed in, since a majority of it's white. Yeah. Oh, this is already starting to look pretty great. Of course, the gray. Let's retime the gray into something here. And this is where we can just kind of have some fun with these values. This one's a little desaturated. And of course, we don't want red. Let's get it into the browns. Maybe even a green would be good on this one. Have some moss growing on there, or the illusion of some moss. Yeah, I'm liking that. That's pretty great. However, if we look very carefully, of course the roughness in here still needs to be adjusted. Yeah, if you look very carefully, you can kind of see some spots where we're not really blending and blurring between these colors all that well. So let's add in another filter, and we're going to blur it. Yeah, that's better. That's better. Now there's soft transitions between some of these effects in here, and generally speaking, that's starting to look pretty cool. I still have to tweak the colors. I'm not entirely happy with what we got going on here, but at the very least, this is a good start. Some of the colors are a little too dark for me, so I'm going to need to go in and make some adjustments to the gradient colors here. I think my base one can be brightened up a little bit. Same with this one. Let's just play around with value here. Yeah, and then this one's the green highlight, so we probably should keep that one pretty dark. But let's desaturate it pretty significantly. Have it be kind of a darker gray with some green in there. A little too far away from, it's a little bit more on the blue side of green than the yellow side of green. Yeah, somewhere right around in there. That's a good place to go. Yeah, it's interesting. I still got some work in there that I need to do, but it's starting to read like a log, which is really the intention behind it. So, okay, now I'm being really super nitpicky. But you can see that I think the importance of having these gradients in there. They really start to block it out. With it off, you know, this is, oops, well, that's just an image still. But with it off, you saw it before, it was just very uniform. Now with a whole series of colors in play here, we can start capturing a little bit more interest in our little log, which is pretty great. Now I need to have the top and the bottom of the log be a different color. So it's going to take a little bit of exploration to figure out how we need to do this. I think at the beginning of this process, maybe what we can try to do, yeah, let's do this. I have an idea. I'm going to duplicate this entire layer, and I'm going to make the colors darker. So let's duplicate it. Let's rename some of this as well. So this is going to be, the top layer is going to be the top of log. And then the bottom one is going to be bottom of log. Okay, and the bottom one, we're going to add another effect. Now let's see, because there's two things that we need to do. We need to have a gradient between the colors. Maybe let's define the colors first, and then we'll go from there. We're going to make them darker. Now, I don't want to go in and individually fine-tune all these colors, so let's add in another effect, another filter, excuse me. And let's put it above all this, and this is just going to be a levels call. And you can either do it from the filters menu, and the guys and gals down at Substance Painter have also given us a function there. And what this allows us to do is just to retime the ins and outs of all these colors. Oops. There we go. I accidentally had the top of log on still. Yeah, there we go. That's what I was looking for. I'm just going to change the midpoint. I'm not going to go too far. That's the top, that's the bottom. That's the top, that's the bottom. Yeah, I like that. Okay, now let's start blending between the two itself. Now at the moment, the top of log is overwriting the entire log itself. So let's add a mask. And then on that mask, let's maybe look at our smart masks. There's a smart mask that we have that might serve the purpose. There's a couple in here. Yeah, we have moss from top. Let's put that on there. And then, let's see what we get. Now, moss from top, so it's only shown at the top. What about at the bottom? So what we're seeing here, yeah, let's go into the mask itself, and let's try flipping it. Let's inverting it. So now we should be getting, yeah, it kind of works. It kind of works, because now it's darker at the top and then much lighter on the bottom. If we change the level a little bit. Yeah, actually, it's going the wrong way. So this is giving me varying effects. I'm not sure if I'm in love with this look. I think probably what I want to have is a little bit more control. So sometimes the path of least resistance is the way to do it. I'm just going to go in and paint the mask. So here's the bottom of the log, so we're exposing the top of the log now. So I'm going to flip this from a black mask to a white mask. So now what we are seeing is the top, and I'm just going to go in and I'm going to paint just with my paintbrush here. Let's add in a paint effect. And we're going to paint black on the mask. And so wherever we paint, it's going to be below the waterline. Yeah, I know. Sometimes it's just the easiest way to get the result that you want. We have these wonderful tools in front of us, but don't forget, sometimes the path of least resistance is okay. Sometimes the easy solution is just to grab your old paintbrush, paint the mask real fast. Luckily, it goes pretty fast. Let's look at the mask to make sure that we're getting all the areas that we want in there. And generally speaking, I was pretty close. And I wanted you guys to see how I go through my thinking, my thought process behind this. You have an idea, but sometimes your first iteration of that idea doesn't work. Luckily, we have some tools that allow us to very quickly, and I mean very quickly, iterate on all of these ideas and figure out a solution that's really going to give us the creative result that we're after. I find myself over-engineering a lot of these results sometimes, and that's just a product of the way I think. So it's nice to be able to have a system that allows us to very quickly go in, hit the M key to go back, and make some big-time adjustments. Now, at the moment, we're exposing the bottom, and I can already see that I need to push my levels on my bottom quite significantly. And I'm also going to blur the top mask itself. So I've painted it. Now let's add in a filter. Let's blur it out. Yeah, just soften that transition a little bit. Let's turn our water back on. Yeah, and it's starting to read like there's some parts of the log down here that have some water, that are a different color. I'm just going to expose it a little bit. And then some parts are dry. Yeah, this is looking great. Maybe up here the water splashed a little higher. And I'm working on the paint layer, but I also got the blur on too, so I can see the impact of all of this just quite wonderfully. I changed my color. I went a little too high, I think, on the underside when I was painting out my mask. Yeah, I like that. Hit the M key to go back to the material. Let's play around with the levels just a little bit more. I want it to read just a little darker. I know it's kind of hard for you guys to see that on the video, but there it is. That's starting to look pretty good. The top's one color, the bottom is a completely different color. And it's starting to look as though the water has been soaked, or the log has been soaked by the water, and we're integrating the illusion between the two. So blocking out our colors is really important. I'm going to do the exact same thing for our flower. I'm going to look at how we can very quickly use the gradients and these generated effects to take advantage of all the information that's in the scene and quickly establish a texture set that works for my objects.